surprise outbreak. Given, as you heard from the introduction, that I have been around for a while and have had the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure of serving in 5 administrations, I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And I hope by the end of my relatively short presentation, you will understand why history, the history of the last 32 years that I've been the director of NIAID, will tell the next administration that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that they will be faced with the challenges that their predecessors were faced with. So for those who think that infectious diseases is gone, there's so many people who've made foolhardy statements not knowing at the time that they made them. I usually show a quote from an old Surgeon General or an old pundit in infectious disease. So I thought I'd pull this one out from Sir McFarland Burnett, who was actually a Nobel Prize winning immunologist who made the statement, as many did, to write about infectious diseases is almost to write of something that has passed into history. The most likely forecast about the future of infectious diseases is that it will be very dull, which is really kind of interesting coming from a semi-genius like McFarland Burnett. And I think what he did, and the mistake that so many people have made, is something that several of our panelists have already referred to. And that is a failure to look beyond our own borders in the issue of the globality of health issues. Not only things that are there that will come here, but surprises that we have. What are the lessons that we learned from HIV? One, you have to commit substantial financial and human resources. These things don't get addressed spontaneously by themselves. You have to enlist the best and the brightest investigators in both basic and clinical research. You have to involve the community, be it the gay community in the United States, or the community in Africa and West Africa when we dealt with Ebola, or the people in South America when we're dealing with Zika. You have to have cross-sector collaboration. You can't do it alone. The CDC can't do it alone. The NIH can't do it alone. You do it with all of us, with industry, with global organizations, with philanthropy and NGOs, and you gotta get the leaders and the policymakers involved. What is for sure, that no matter what, history has told us definitively that it will happen, because infectious diseases, as I said 8 years ago in this article with David Morans and Greg Folkers, that it is a perpetual challenge. It is not going to go.
Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. Now, part of the reason for this is that we have invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence, but we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic. We're not ready for the next epidemic. Let's look at Ebola. I'm sure all of you read about it in the newspaper. Lots of tough challenges. I followed it carefully through the case analysis tools we use to track polio eradication. And as you look at what went on, the problem wasn't that there was a system that didn't work well enough. The problem was that we didn't have a system at all. In fact, there are some pretty obvious key missing pieces. We didn't have a group of epidemiologists ready to go who would have gone, seen what the disease was, see how far it had spread. The case reports came in on paper. It was very delayed before they were put online, and they were extremely inaccurate. We didn't have a medical team ready to go. We didn't have a way of preparing people. Now, Médecins Sans Frontières did a great job orchestrating volunteers, but even so, we were far slower than we should have been getting the thousands of workers into these countries. And a large epidemic would require us to have hundreds of thousands of workers. There was no one there to look at treatment approaches, no one to look at the diagnostics, no one to figure out what tools should be used. As an example, we could have taken the blood of survivors, processed it, and put that plasma back in people to protect them. But that was never tried. So there was a lot that was missing, and these things are really a global failure. The WHO is funded to monitor epidemics, but not to do these things I talked about. Now in the movies, it's quite different. There's a group of handsome epidemiologists ready to go. They move in, they save the day, but that's just pure Hollywood. The failure to prepare could allow the next epidemic to be dramatically more devastating than Ebola. Let's look at the progression of Ebola over this year. About 10,000 people died, and nearly all were in the 3 West African countries. There's 3 reasons why it didn't spread more. The first is there was a lot of heroic work by the health workers. They found the people and they prevented more infections. The second is the nature of the virus. Ebola does not spread through the air. And by the time you're contagious, most people are so sick that they're bedridden. Third, it didn't get into many urban areas, and that was just luck. If it had gotten into a lot more urban areas, the case numbers would have been much larger. So next time, we might not be so lucky. You can have a virus where people feel well enough while they're infectious that they get on a plane or they go to a market. The source of the virus could be a natural epidemic like Ebola, or it could be bioterrorism. And so there are things that would literally make things 1,000 times worse. In fact, let's look at a model of a virus spread through the air like the Spanish flu back in 1918. So here's what would happen. It would spread throughout the world very, very quickly. And you can see there's over 30 million people die from that epidemic. So this is a serious problem. We should be concerned. But in fact, we can build a really good response system. We have the benefits of all the science and technology that we talk about here. We've got cell phones to get information from the public and get information out to them. We have satellite maps where we can see where people are and where they're moving. We have advances in biology that should dramatically change the turnaround time to look at a pathogen and be able to make drugs and vaccines that fit for that pathogen. So we can have tools, but those tools need to be put into an overall global health system, and we need preparedness. The best lessons, I think, on how to get prepared are, again, what we do for war. For soldiers, we have full-time waiting to go. We have reserves that can scale us up to large numbers. NATO has a mobile unit that can deploy very rapidly. NATO does a lot of war games to check, are people well-trained? Do they understand about fuel and logistics and the same radio frequencies? So they are absolutely ready to go. So those are the kinds of things we need to deal with an epidemic. What are the key pieces? First is we need strong health systems in poor countries. That's where mothers can give birth safely, kids can get all their vaccines, but also where we'll see the outbreak very early on. We need a medical reserve corps, lots of people who've got the training and background who are ready to go with the expertise. And then we need to pair those medical people with the military, taking advantage of the military's ability to move fast, do logistics, and secure areas. We need to do simulations, germ games, not war games, so that we see where the holes are. The last time a germ game was done in the United States was back in 2001, and it didn't go so well. So far, the score is germs 1, people 0. Finally, we need lots of advanced R&D in areas of vaccine.
Greetings, everyone. Yes, this is Elder Jason McIntosh. Just following on from my last couple of videos. In my first video regarding the biblical evidence that epidemics and diseases and pestilence will cover the entire globe. I mentioned in there a couple of videos or recordings or statements that were made by one of the great entrepreneurs around the world. Everybody know him as Bill Gates. And I also mentioned Fauci, Dr. Fauci, who's currently one of the senior medical officers to President Trump. I don't know if you had a chance to watch the videos, but I'm going to put them on this update, and I would like you to just to listen carefully and pay close attention to the dates, because I believe that what is going on, it's not just by accident. In fact, I was traveling home today and I heard one of the former senior bosses of the MI6 said he believes that the virus was actually created, or should I say manipulated or made or manufactured, whatever description you want to use. It was said. In fact, LBC picked up the story and was allowing people to ring in and ask questions about this. So are we getting closer to some true evidence of what really happened? In my first video, I mentioned to my audience, could this be a homemade virus? And they're giving it the name, they're giving it, they said it was a SARS-2. They've added all sorts of description to this virus. But I am not saying I have evidence that it was man-made, but it's kind of getting that way. And in fact, if you pay a close attention, not just to mainstream news, but to the internet, and I'm not saying everything on the internet is correct, there are a lot of people talking about the virus and was it man-made and what the purpose of it is. As you probably would have heard in the news today, as an update, is that come the 15th of June, it would be mandatory for us to wear a mask. Now, on top of that, wearing the mask will become mandatory unless you have a justifiable reason, which I'm going to assume they won't allow anyone to have one, and you will be fined or you will not be allowed to travel. Now, I don't believe that's where it's going to stop. This will soon become mandatory in every building you enter into. And never in history has this ever happened. But I want to say then, as we continue to wait for evidence and information, watch closely with what's going on with America and China. There's something not quite correct that's going on with China, because China has not released as much information as the West would like them to. And of course, the West is pushing them to tell us what's going on. But I don't want to say America is free from all of this, because when we go back into the Obama's presidency and his time as the president, his colleagues, Dr. Fauci, as I mentioned earlier, was heavily involved with working with the laboratory lab within China, Wuhan. And I understand, and I think there's evidence of this, that there are many, many viruses. But please, I'm going to finish what I'm saying now, but please watch those two videos, and hopefully they would shed some light. As I find out more information, I will update you. And again, as I say, the whole essence of what I'm trying to do is bring a biblical implication to all of what is going on. And hopefully you can see that the Word of God is not out of touch with time, but it was designed by God to answer modern questions in a modern time by an everlasting God. God bless you, and we'll speak soon. And I hope you subscribe. I hope you follow what I'm saying. And soon or later we will get the connection, because God never leaves himself without a witness.